I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and this is the Volvo XC40, one of our favourite small premium SUVs, and that's for a number of reasons. The first is, unusually for me, I really like the design of this small crossover, but that generally bodes with my feelings on current Volvo design anyway. I think they make a good looking car, mainly because the designers know when to put the pencil down. The shapes are not simplistic, but they are simple, they're good looking, blocky, traditional, and refreshingly, the XC40 actually looks like a crossover with its sort of plastic bumper surrounds on this base model that also runs on sensibly small but not unattractive wheels. Now this Glacier Silver is an interesting colour, and this XC40 is a conservative specification over black leather, but you can go for much more out there combinations, and you've probably seen some of them running around on the road. It's a nice looking car, but also, as you're about to find out, the XC40's virtues are more than skin deep. It's also really nice to sit in and ride in, and it's good to drive, mainly because Volvo have not tried to make this vehicle sporty. Because unless you're buying something like an Audi Q3, you don't really want one of these vehicles to be athletic, you want it to be comfortable. And that's what the XC40 is. And that starts here in the interior, which is easy to use, it's functionally laid out, and the seats themselves are comfy and supportive. As standard, the XC40 base model, the Momentum, it does have cloth seats, but still electrically adjustable, though you can upgrade at pretty low cost, under $1,000, to leather seating in a variety of colours, and this particular vehicle has that option. The upholstery itself is soft, but still hardy, contrast stitched with a grey stitching through it, which looks nice, and there's plenty of electric adjustment and lumbar that goes up and down. Plus, we also have an additional optional package that adds heated seats and a heated steering wheel to this particular vehicle. Tech-wise, we have a 9-inch vertical touchscreen here. Now, vertical touchscreens are still pretty rare in the industry, and they work well, just like your iPad, basically. You swipe up, down, and around. You can get a full map to take up the entire screen, which makes it pretty easy to see where you're going, though there's not too much lag factor, just a bit of lag when zooming in and out. In terms of multimedia, we have a good stereo even on the base car, but you can option up Harman Kardon audio as we have in this particular vehicle, which sounds really crisp. You also have a digital screen ahead of you. It can't actually do all that much, certainly less than an Audi virtual cockpit, but it's at least bright, crisp and clear, and you can put a map between the traditional looking analog gauges. In terms of other trims, this is where the Volvo really stands out above a lot of mainstream cars, and it's not even that much more expensive. It only starts at $46,000, which is kind of at the top end of where you'd find a Mazda CX-5 or a Hyundai Tucson. We have lovely soft touch materials all around the cabin, leather-like surfaces on the doors. We also have nice aluminium trim here on the base model that switches to wood on the mid-spec inscription that also adds all-wheel drive. But there's also a ton of practical touches. We have a deep central bin here with an actual bin that you can remove, so it's nice and easy to clean. Big cup holders, a tray ahead of the shifter with wireless charging that actually works because it has guides to keep your phone on it, which is quite rare. Massive door bins that are flock lined all the way up the door, and you can actually get that in orange. Plus thoughtful touches like a little handbag holder here out of the glove box that can carry a handbag, man bag, takeaway, whatever you want, as long as it's not more than 2 kilos. So in terms of practicality, it really feels like Volvo are on top of it here in the XC40, and it's good up front. Let's check out the back seat. This is another area where Volvo's engineers have done a very, very good packaging job, because even though this is a pretty compact vehicle, as you can see, the back seat is very spacious. As you can see, headroom is really good for myself at 6 foot, even though we have the panoramic sunroof on this car. And that's because the XC40 isn't a failed attempt at looking like a coupe. It looks like a wagon, so you have wagon-like headroom. In terms of legroom, it's also very good. I've got 2 or 3 inches behind my own driving position. Toe room's also fine. You could get 3 people abreast back here because the floor is pretty low, but I really see this as more for maximum 4 in the car. But the XC40 is going to mainly be bought by couples, I think, because we don't have the integrated booster seats that you get in Volvo's larger vehicles. But we do have plenty of other stuff. Netting behind both seats. Those cool Art Deco style air vents repeated here in the second row too. All those soft touch materials continue on the doors, and we have a plethora of extra storage spaces, plus the usual suspects like a flip down armrest with 2 cup holders. So as small family transport goes, this is about as good as it gets so far. That good news also continues around the back, where the XC40 is a really nice, shapely little car. Spaced out Volvo badging means you certainly won't miss it on the road. And we have a power tailgate here, which operates more smartly than some rivals and without any beeping, which is always nice, revealing a very, very spacious boot for this class. The opening's pretty wide. It's also flat, so we can slide bags in and out. And we have heaps of practical touches here. You know, so practical you'd think the engineers went to the same sort of school as the people at IKEA, because we have a little thing that you can fold up here to make it easier to hang your shopping bags off. We've got a restricted netted area over to one side, 12-volt socket, and additional hard shopping bag hooks as well, plus controls on the door to make it easy to close the door or to lock the entire car. We're not going to do that though. We're going to jump in the driver's seat and see what Volvo's smallest crossover is like on the road. So what is the Volvo XC40 like to drive? Do the dynamics match how good this thing looks outside and how comfortable and practical the cabin is? Well, the good news right off the bat, and you probably already know this if you've done a bit of research on this car, that it's actually really good to drive, but in a different way to what most of this vehicle's competitors go for. I generally find that in this small premium SUV class, cars try and be a little bit sporty, maybe a high riding alternative to a hot hatch, and generally because they have a higher center of gravity that doesn't actually work that well. On the other hand, what Volvo have done is to make the XC40 focused on comfort and just giving you that kind of relaxing drive that Volvos are typically known for, and that's a recipe that works just as well in the XC40 as it does in the brand's larger SUVs. While you can have the XC40 with a faster engine and a sport suspension if you want it, 2 out of the 3 models in the range, i.e. this Momentum and the mid-spec Inscription, just have a more gentle turbo petrol engine and a comfort chassis that just matches this car absolutely perfectly. But we'll come back to the ride and handling in a minute. First, let's talk about what motivates the XC40. And at the moment in Australia, you can have any engine you want as long as it's a 2-litre turbo petrol, but 2 different tunes are available. The Momentum and the Inscription get a 140 kilowatt, 300 Newton meter tune. In the Momentum, it's front wheel drive, and in the Inscription, that car has all-wheel drive. And then the top spec R design, which does look really cool, has a beefier 180 kilowatt, 350 Newton meter tune and that sport chassis. Now, all of these cars pair that engine to an 8-speed torque converter auto that is really seamless. You barely ever notice it. And in all of them, these are nice, easy engines to drive, easy low-end torque. It just puts on speed gracefully. It's not all that quick, nor is it particularly slow. It's just a good amount of pace for this kind of car. The engines are almost silent most of the time. When you start getting into them a little bit more, they're a little bit gravelly and workmanlike. They don't sound quite as sweet as the equivalent 2-litre petrol in, say, the BMW X2. But once again, for me, this segment isn't really about that kind of oral pleasure unless you are looking to buy something like the Audi RS Q3, which is going to be a lot more expensive than something like this. Instead, it really is about cosseting you, both in terms of suburban driving like I'm doing now, or on the highway, which we did plenty of as well, and also on country roads where it just has a nice flowing demeanor. This is a car that you want to drive just at sort of 7/10, not really at 10/10, and that suits me just fine. One thing you do find with the XC40 is that it has really light steering, and that makes it especially maneuverable in town. It's lighter than you'll expect, but on the highway it does firm up and it doesn't have all that much play on center, so it's not a problem. It's just going to be a little lighter than some cars, and if you're looking for meatiness, if you associate heaviness or meatiness in the steering with luxury, then it's not going to be something that you find on the XC40. But the handling itself is decent. There's a bit of body roll, but it's manageable and it certainly doesn't make you feel seasick or anything like that. After all, this is a fairly tight little SUV. It's also a fairly heavy little SUV, and that hurts the fuel economy. We got about 9 litres per 100 Ks in mainly suburban driving, which is okay for this class, but when we remember that this is a pretty small car, it's thirsty compared to a hatchback, that's for sure. But it does give it a solid and planted feeling out on the open road, and it does have a sort of self-assured, confident character. It also has a compliant and comfortable character because the ride quality is really good. One benefit of the Momentum is that it has smaller wheels and lots of sidewall, really chunky tire, but I don't think it looks bad. I think it looks fine, but it gives you a really, really good amount of ability to soak up bumps through the tire, and the suspension itself is firm in a European way, but certainly not uncomfortable. Now, if you go for the sports chassis in the XC40 R design, I do think it becomes a little bit too firm, so I would stick to a Momentum or an Inscription. An interesting thing to note is that later on there will be an all-electric XC40 available called the P8 Recharge, and that car will have about 400 kilometers of range. And here's a photo of what that's going to look like, and I'm really excited for that because while this petrol engine is fine, there's nothing wrong with it, it's not, you know, a star or anything like that, and I actually think the XC40's just graceful, compliant character will suit an all-electric interpretation extremely well. So I'm quite looking forward to it actually. Overseas there's also a plug-in hybrid, but we don't get that here in Australia. Now in terms of safety features, this is a Volvo, so you'd expect it to be safe, and in terms of crashworthiness, it absolutely is. This is a safe car, but here on the Momentum, you do have to option up a safety pack if you want the best features, and that's stuff like adaptive cruise control, lane keep assist, and things like a 360-degree parking camera that makes maneuvering this vehicle super, super easy. So those are our detailed observations on the 2020 Volvo XC40. This thing is about as good as it gets in the small luxury SUV class, with all of those thoughtful touches that Volvo have put in this car, and the fact it's heavily biased towards comfort and plushness. This thing is lovely to live with every day. I'd just make sure to go for the all-wheel drive grades to make sure that it has the traction that it deserves, but really in any spec, the XC40 is a very, very nice little crossover. Let me know what you think about this car down below the video. While you're there, make sure to hit subscribe and the notification bell. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.